Natan's here. Russell's here. Yofi. We're learning the laws of brachot. Corona, no corona. We keep going. Shua's back with us. Baruch Hashem. Feeling good?
Always was.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing. You bet. You bet.
I had a question. Yesterday, when you talked about the Amazon, you said there was a short version. Yes. You said the short version.
The really short version from the Talmud that I spoke about.
There's a thank you Hashem for the food.
That's it, pretty much.
The dub one, right?
Right. Everybody loves that one.
Yeah. No, I was
Don't try this at home, folks.
No,
you know,
sure.
but
What's your opinion on the Temeni one? The Yemenites also say a very short version.
Right. So if they're Yemenites, then that's the custom. You do your custom. Right. They don't have all the harachmans, for example, at the end, and they have a little bit of
that from where? Also from the Talmud?
Yeah, it all comes from the Talmud. The structure is the same. The 3 blessings, a 4th blessing, but that was added later, and then and the primary themes in each one of the 3 blessings is also mentioned in the Talmud. The text, the formulation is a little bit different. Even between the Sephardi and Ashkenazi, there's a little bit of a different formulation, but the themes that have to be there are written in the Talmud, and they're discussed. So everybody has to keep their tradition, you know. And if you don't have a tradition, you choose one. You choose to join one of the major communities of Israel, and
you can't pick and choose like that, can you?
Not about one issue or the other issue, right? Usually, you should try to join a community. Yeah, that's a catch-22. A lot of my students find themselves in. They're here in yeshiva, and they're trying to train. But how do you train for the community where you don't know which community you're going to join at the end of the story? So right here, the community is mostly, we daven Nusach Sfarad upstairs. That's a version of Ashkenaz. But there is sometimes, some Sephardi stuff. It's a little bit of a mix. But in terms of halacha, you should choose either Sephardi halacha or Ashkenazi halacha. And as we learned many times, the differences are not that major. Focus on the commonality, not on the differences, and you'll get 90% of the way. You're, of course, it's nerve-wracking because you want to know what I should do, but life is complex and halacha is complex, so you don't always get a simple answer. In the end of the day, if you're doing conversion, for example, so when you start practicing as a Jew, you generally are directed to choose the Sephardi custom, the Ashkenazi custom, and sometimes it has to do with where you came from, but more importantly, I think it has to do with where you're going to, which community you're going to join. If you're going to live in, a particular town, which, they're all Yemenites, and you're marrying a Yemenite woman, so then it makes sense to take on the Yemenite practices, even though you're a convert. And you can have a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Yemenite. There is such things. Okay. We have one. We have a Boger of ours who married a Yemenite woman. He's from Sweden. Yeah, totally. Yeah, but they're happily married. They're having a baby. Okay. Other questions from yesterday's class? No, we're good. Okay, so we talked about Birkat HaMazon. We started with the general topic was brachot for Shua, who was joining us. Hope you did good things during your time in Bidud. Good. That's a good, yeah. Anyways, we're learning the laws of brachot. We talked about Birkot HaMitzvah, Birkot Shevach VaHoda'ah, and now we're focusing in on Birkot HaNehenin, blessings on enjoyment of food. And we started yesterday with the Birkat HaMazon, the biblical mitzvah, bracha. A little bit we talked about the 5 grains. The 5 grains which qualify as bread. that if you make bread from one of those 5 grains, you make the Birkat HaMazon. We talked about the after brachas, the 3 different after brachas, how we saw there's an after bracha called Me'ein Shalosh. Who can explain to me what those words mean? Me'ein Shalosh.
It's from summary of the tree.
Like. And Me'ein means like. So it's like the 3. What does that mean? There's a bracha that's like the 3. What's the 3?
The 3 major blessings of the book.
That's right. The 3 blessings which make up the biblical component of the Birkat HaMazon, and that those themes get shortened when you're having cake or cookies instead of bread from those 5 grains. And another name for the bracha me'ein shalosh. Al hamichya. Correct. And we said it gets expanded to also any one of the 7 species. Not only the 5 grains, but also wine and fruit like figs and dates and stuff like that. Yafeh. So that's what we covered yesterday. And then we said there's a small, the 3rd after bracha. Borei nefashot.
That's only 1 bracha.
That's 1, not 3. That's correct. And that's for which kind of foods? Everything not included in the previous, right? If it doesn't have a Birkat HaMazon and doesn't have a qualify for an Al Mechia, so then we say the Bor Nefashot. Good. Of course, the classic is Shehakol, but it doesn't have to be. It could be Bor Pri Adama. It could be Bor Pri Eitz if it's not one of the 7 fruits. You should just have an apple. You should say Bor Nefashot afterwards. Mezonot, usually if you say Mezonot, you say Al Mechia. There's one exception.
Rice.
Excellent. What's the acronym?
Amen.
Amen.
Nefashot.
Nefashot. Yafeh. Okay, we're learning something here. Okay. Excellent. A little bit at a time. Okay, today I want to introduce you to a great book where I used to teach my children the laws of blessings. It's called Let's Learn About Brachos. And it's very cute. It's about a summer camp for little boys, little Haredi boys, I think. And they go on different trips and different activities. And each one they learn about brachot. This one is the one I'm going to start with. I'll be happy to, but first I want to look at the pages that I photocopied for you. And I'll pass those around. Okay. And then this particular page, of course, the book, you could buy it. You could buy it in the store. Do you know this is actually printed by Feldheim. Feldheim, the store in Jerusalem, is right down the street.
Right here?
Yeah. Yeah. They have an actual store?
Which direction?
So if you go out of the Machon, I'll explain to you. Sorry? You need 2 more. Sure. Of course. If you go out of the Machon, you turn right, and you get to the kiosk with the falafel and everything. Yeah. The circle. At the circle, you turn left. Okay? You with me so far?
Yes.
Yeah.
You keep going straight for about 10 minutes.
Oh, I know what that's for.
You cross over the road. You wave to the what's left of the Angel's Bakery, and you keep going down. It's called Beit Hadfus Street. That's the street. That it winds a little bit down. There's it goes down and then it goes straight, and there's stores on your right, stores on your left. Lots of stuff. There's a gas station. Keep going for about 10 minutes, even more, a little bit more than 10 minutes. Opposite from the Osher Ad, on the left hand, there's a big supermarket, and on the right hand side, there's a strip mall. One of the beginning of it is a garage for cars and motorcycles and stuff. Then there's a butcher shop, and then there's a bookstore. Bottom line is that's Feldheim's store. Yeah.
Been there many times. I didn't know that's what it was.
Yeah.
They sell Feldheim there?
No, they also sell many other things, but and they have a lot of English books.
Yes.
It's about a 10-minute walk from here.
Do they sell like Humashim and stuff?
Everything. Quite a large selection in English, as well as Hebrew, of course. I don't know about other languages. Okay, so we mentioned yesterday that the Birkat HaMazon is of biblical origin, and we said there's one major ramification of that. Who remembers? As opposed to all the other blessings which are of only rabbinic origin.
Biblical.
There's Birkat Hamazon is biblical. So what's the ramification? In English, that's called, not English. In Aramaic, it's called the nafka mina. It's a good
like
word to know.
It's what you mentioned about if you're not sure if you did it, whether you be strict or lenient or not.
That's right. Cases of doubt. Cases of doubt. If it's biblical, we're strict, and if it's lenient, if it's rabbinic, I'll just silence that. Then you're able to be lenient. You're strict if it's biblical, and you're lenient if it's and lenient. In this case, usually it's interpreted to mean that you don't say the blessing again, or possibly again. You're not sure you said it. Now, one of the ramifications of that also is that what happens. We didn't talk about this yesterday. That in the Birkat Hamazon, we sort of saw it inside the Sidur, that there are additions. You add in certain paragraphs for certain days. What do we add in? Purim, Chanukah, what do we add in? Al Anisim. And what else? What other things? Thomas? That's right, Ya'alev Ya'alevo on Rosh Chodesh. What else? On Shabbat, we add in a paragraph for Shabbat.
All the holidays.
All the holidays. Now the question comes, because if you're it's called in Yiddish benching. Benching means to bless, to say the Birkat Hamazon. Is oftentimes we use the Yiddish to bench. So let's say you're blessing the Birkat Hamazon and it's Shabbat, and because you're so used to saying it every day, because whenever you have your bread, you say the Birkat Hamazon. I can't imagine this would ever happen to any of you, but some people are forgetful. And when they're saying the Birkat Hamazon, they're so used to, going through the Sidur, and, okay, these pages I skip. During the weekday, I skip it. And then Shabbat, you also skip it. You forgot to say the addition. Yeah. You forgot to say the addition for Shabbat. It starts with the words Ritzeh. What do you do? So the halach actually says that if you, on Shabbat, you don't say the special addition for Shabbat, it's invalid. It's as if you haven't said the Birkat Grace after the meals. Okay. You better remember that, because if you don't, you have to repeat it. And now comes the question, what happens if I don't remember? If I said it.
Because if it's D'oraita, if it's D'oraita, you...
Exactly. If it's D'oraita, even if you say, I don't remember, I was thinking about the dessert, I don't know, I was thinking about my bed, I'm going to bed soon, whatever it is, I've said that, I know I finished the Birkat Hamazon, I said that, but I don't know if I added it in Ritzeh. If I didn't add it in Ritzeh, it's not kosher. So whenever you have a doubt about a biblical mitzvah, the biblical bracha of Birkat Hamazon, you have to repeat it.
Thing or just like
the whole thing. The whole thing. You can't just say that one passage. You start over from the beginning and recite the full Birkat Hamazon, all 4 blessings with the extra harachamans, no cheating, with the everything from start to finish, including the Ritzeh this time, and then you're good to go. So that's clear. What's not so clear is what happens on Rosh Chodesh. If you forgot to say the Ya'alev Yavo. So it is clear that Ya'alev Yavo, Rosh Chodesh doesn't really have an obligation to have a meal on it, a festive meal. Shabbat, you're supposed to have 3 festive meals in there. So you have to really say Birkat Hamazon, you're supposed to be having a meal with bread. And if you don't have the meal with bread, you're not fulfilling your Shabbat regulations, your obligations. So that's why you really have to repeat the Birkat Hamazon. But on Rosh Chodesh, you don't have to eat it all if you don't want to. So if you forgot the Ya'alev Yavo, you don't have to repeat the Birkat Hamazon. So you see the difference here? It's just specifically Shabbat because you have an obligation to eat 3 meals. Yom Tov, Yom Tov like Pesach, or Shavuot, or Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah. Let's say you forgot the Ya'aleh V'Yavo. There's a Ya'aleh V'Yavo on the holidays. So there is a mitzvah to eat a meal. Right? It's not like Rosh Chodesh. You have to eat a meal with bread, but you only have to eat 2 meals. It's only Shabbat that you need 3 meals. Very interesting. So on Yom Tov, if you forgot Ya'aleh V'Yavo, on the first 2 meals, if you happen to have a third meal on Pesach, because you're hungry or whatever, then if you forgot Ya'aleh V'Yavo, you don't have to return. It depends on whether the meal that you're eating is a meal of obligation. Shabbat, they are meals of obligation. Okay, so far so good? 1 second, I'll add one more law, and then I'll take your questions, because I think I may be covering your questions with the additional presentation. Now, what happens if you're saying the Birkat HaMazon, and you say bracha number 1, Hazan et Hakol. You say bracha number 2, it ends up with Baruch Atah Hashem al haaretz al hamazon. We looked at it inside yesterday. Maybe you don't remember the maf bahar. That's okay. Let's say you say the third bracha. Right? Starts with, so what's that called, the third bracha? It's about, what's the theme? Jerusalem. Excellent. You start with Rachem na Hashem Elokeinu al Yisrael Amecha. Please have mercy on Jerusalem, on the Jewish people in Jerusalem. And then you're supposed to add in the Ritzei. Let's say it's Shabbat. You're supposed to add in the Ritzei in that section. And you finish up with Uvnei Yerushalayim, Merakodesh, Meher Remeinu, Baruch Hashem, Bonei Barachamav Yerushalayim. Amen. Right? There's the exception. We do say Amen after our own blessing. Right? We talked about this yesterday. So then you say, wait, I've not finished my Birkat HaMazon yet. You still have the fourth blessing and all the supplemental petitions, requests. Harachman, Harachman. So you're right there, Bonei Barachamav Yerushalayim. Amen. And then you say to yourself, wait. Before I go any further, did I say Ritzei or did I not say Ritzei? It's not like you've moved on further and then you remember. You catch yourself mid Birkat HaMazon, in the middle, right there. So there's a special law. You know what I like? We find this in the laws of prayer in general. I compare it to the bumper sticker law. So here's your bus, okay? And you're waiting at the bus stop here, and the bus comes, and you're supposed to get on the bus, and you're supposed to climb on the bus, and you can't for some reason you're reading your book or you're playing on your phone. You're not noticing that the bus came. Now the bus is moving on. Now you wake up. And you see, hang on, the bus. So you start yelling, Rega, 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 right? You've been in Israel long enough, right? That's what you say, Rega. So there is an option of hopping on the back of the bus. Yeah. You can imagine you have a skateboard, right? And you're hanging on. Or a better example would be like, you wanted to put a certain sticker on the side of the bus, but the bus has moved on. There's something called a bumper sticker, right? Yeah. The back of the car, you stick on some kind of advertisement, or sometimes it's a funny joke or whatever it is. Yeah. So the same law applies when you're saying the different sections of the prayer. You were supposed to say the Ritzei, the extra addition for Shabbat, in the middle of the Uvnei Yerushalayim blessing, the Jerusalem blessing. But if you haven't moved on, the bus is still, at the stop. You can't get in the middle of it anymore, but you can still tack on something in the end that's good enough. So there's a special version of the Shabbat addition called Ritzei, special version which you get to say if you're right there at the moment, you haven't started blessing number 4 yet. It's a fascinating mechanism. And some sidurim, some birkonim, some of those little, benchers they're called, some of them have it in there. I said, just in case you forgot the Shabbat addition. And you remembered, but you remembered it's precisely at that point, after you've said of Yerushalayim and you haven't continued on, you can say this special statement, and we're going to look at it in just a minute. We'll see it inside, okay? But that's pretty much the laws of forgetting and special additions. There's other additions we mentioned, and I'll take questions in just a second. What about, Natan was so correct, he said there's other things we add into the Birkat Hamazon on Purim and Chanukah. What's that called? Alanisim. That we add into the second blessing, right? The blessing of Thanksgiving. So what happens if you forget those?
You don't need to say it.
You don't have to go back at all. Just like Ya'aleh V'yavo and Rosh Chodesh. You fulfilled your obligation in any case of saying the Birkat Hamazon. Okay, so a little bit intricate, but we'll see the laws in just a minute. Now I'll take some questions. David, you're good?
Well, I have a question about, there's one kid on the picture and it says...
Well, we'll look at the pictures in a minute. Just about what I said.
Okay.
Yeah, Natan, you're good? From what I said?
1 second.
Okay.
Wait, there's 2 blessings for Shabbat. The main one that's after about the Jerusalem, and then there's the one at the end, the little section.
Good. You're right. In the Harachamans, what did we call them yesterday? Additional requests?
Yes.
There's also a special one for Shabbat. But as we said yesterday, those additional requests are not essential parts of the Birkat Hamazon. It's not, so obviously if you forget them, you don't have to go back. Okay? Good point. Also for Rosh Chodesh and also for Yom Tov, that's right. We add in, there's one for Medinat Yisrael. Have you heard of that? Oh, we talked about it yesterday.
I had a question as well. What if
Okay.
you forget to say Birkat Hamazon, like in general? Let's say like you have a meal, like I have a meal yesterday, and I forgot to say it. Like what?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. We've been talking about what happens if you say Birkat Hamazon incorrectly or with forgetting something. What if you forget the whole thing?
Yes. Like yesterday.
Ouch. Oh no.
Do tshuva.
Oh no.
I forgot.
Of course you do tshuva, but is there a particular way you can do tshuva regarding the blessing itself? Of course you could always,
72 minutes.
do vidui, say you're sorry to Hashem and say, dear God, I've sinned. I didn't do a biblical mitzvah. It's a biblical mitzvah if you add enough bread. And so it's a serious business. But beyond that, the question is, can you, when you remember,
Yes.
can you say it then? I understand the question. You have an answer for that question? Somebody else wants to answer that question?
I have an answer.
You want me to answer that question? Which would you prefer, Natan? Would you like me to answer
I
that?
prefer you to prefer, but I have I guess a thought of mine. That
So what's your thought?
my thought is next time that I make a meal that's with lechem, I keep in my mind. Obviously, I have in my mind that I'm using this blessing for the previous meal. I know that it won't cover.
That's a nice thought, but that's unheard of. He wants me to answer him. One
Okay.
second. He wants me to answer him. Sorry, he wants me to answer him.
Yes,
I'll take your the halacha is that you have a window of opportunity. Technically, the Talmud says until the food that you've eaten has been digested. 72 minutes. It usually gets translated into, because, it depends how much you ate and how long your digestion takes. How do you measure your digestion? I don't have a digestion meter, inside sewn into my shirt pocket. But the standard is 72 minutes after the meal.
Okay.
And, right, if you're not hungry yet for the next meal, that would be the best translation. But then you can still say it. But we'll learn more rules about it as we go on. But that's the long and short of it. Okay, Jacob, you good? You have a question?
And this example, if I would say it anyway, like maybe 2 hours later, would be saying Hashem's name in vain, right?
Correct. So you're not allowed to do it any later than 72 minutes. Yeah, correct. Okay, you're good?
My question was just a small little tangent in the cartoon.
We haven't read the cartoons yet.
Yeah.
Renan?
Shabbos, we must have 3 meals?
Yes.
Yes? Because, the Shabbos now is short.
It's a challenge. A gastric challenge, no question about it.
Yeah, well, so it's very, very hard for me to keep a meal.
There are allowances. For somebody who feels...
Do you need 3 meals?
No, including Friday night is 1, and then 2 during the day. But it can get difficult, and there are certain ways that you can sort of have a smaller meal for the third meal.
Then you
Hanan?
fulfill the mitzvah if you just have some wine and 2 pieces of bread.
Okay, sure. But
why not make a meal?
what? Let's say you
Why not
can't.
make a sandwich?
You're not even hungry for 2 pieces of bread. Can be too much sometimes. I know as a 22-year-old, 21-year-old, it's hard for you to imagine. But when you get older, your stomach sort of contracts a little bit, and it can be hard for you to eat even 1 piece of bread, even once a day, let alone So, okay, Renan.
No, because it's like I have the nice meal
That's one.
and I have the Salhain meal.
The what meal?
Salhain.
Tzoraim, afternoon, yes.
Yeah. And then I go to Menachem.
Yeah.
I go to then we study in the Beit Knesset, and then I eat, and then it's over.
I understand. The only problem is you're missing out the third meal.
Yeah.
There is
So you need to give yourself a third meal.
a tradition which I don't condone, although unless you happen to join that particular group of Jews, that's their custom. They're out on a limb. They're doing something strange, but they're allowed to because they had great rabbis which lead them, and that is, I'm talking about Chabad. They have a custom that the third meal they fulfill with saying words of Torah. Instead of eating food, they say they learn.
I am eating Torah.
You're eating Torah, exactly.
I didn't know that.
It's very hard to condone. The halacha does make allowances for short days, and if you're not hungry, you can't force yourself to eat. That's disgusting. The Torah never tells you to do anything disgusting, and so they say if you can't have bread, you can maybe have fruits. You could have fish and meat, not a full-blown meal with bread. If you can't have that, maybe have a piece of cake and coffee. A lot of people do that. Something that's a minor meal instead of a major meal. But ideally, you should be striving to have full 3 meals with bread at each one.
So coffee and cake is enough?
If in extenuating circumstances, yes. The halacha allows for extenuating circumstances. Okay, but we'll talk about that another time. Yes, Thomas.
If someone forgot the 4 addition in Mein Shalosh, like for Shabbat, for Rosh Chodesh,
Excellent question.
you have to repeat the brass
Because you said that there's no obligatory meal on those, so you don't have to.
Well, there is an obligatory meal on Shabbat.
He didn't say Shabbat. He just asked for the main shalosh, the arba.
No, but he is asking about the main shalosh on Shabbat. If you're having a snack, not your major meal, on Shabbat, if you make kiddush, many people have after shul in the morning, before they go to the main meal, they have a small sort of snack meal, and they make kiddush. Some people have ice cream at their kiddush. Some people have herring. You've heard of this custom? It's an Eastern European thing. Whiskey. Some people have kiddush, and it's not a full meal, so you're not saying Birkat Hamazon. But you have to, if you're making kiddush, you have to say Ala Gefen, which is a version of Ala Michya, and whenever you make kiddush, you have to also have some food. It has to be called Kiddush B'Makom Suda. Again, these are the laws of Shabbat, which we studied last year. We're not going to go into that at length. And the question is, do you have to, if you forget the extra addition in the Al HaMichya, do you have to repeat it? I believe the answer is no. Like we said before, you only have to repeat it if it's an obligatory meal. Since this is a snack, it's not one of the 3 major meals, then you don't have to repeat the Al HaMichya, even if you forgot the additions for Shabbat. I should check that, but I think I'm right. Yeah.
You have only 9 minutes for say the blessing after you have
72, we just said before.
No, not for the Birkat Hamazon, for the Mein Shalosh.
The Me'en Shalosh, I don't recall that there's a specific timing factor of 9 minutes. Where'd you get that from? I don't know. I have to look that up. I don't know. When I don't know, I'll say I don't know. Shua, you're good? No questions? Yeah, Russell. Thank you. Couple of questions. Go for it.
The first one is, so there's a special way and place to say the Ritzay if you forgot to in its normal place, like before you say Amen.
Correct,
Something
correct.
Like that for Yom Tov? Like
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's a special version for Yom Tov as well. Yeah.
Okay. And second question is, what if you, so like whenever I have children one day, Bezrat Hashem.
Soon.
Soon, very soon.
First get married though.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Can't forget that step.
Yeah.
But
Don't skip stuff.
and I'm instructing like whenever my child like he's picking up like to say blessings before and after meals, probably before he's bar mitzvah because he can hear, and he can.
Sure.
So, but he's not obligated to keep something like Yom Kippur, and so my kid's going to be starving that day, and I make him something to eat. And so
Yes.
How does he thank God for the food on that day?
There's a special Ya'alev Yavo with an addition for Yom Kippur.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've never
It
seen
appears in some of the Birkonim and some of the benchers. It does appear. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Somebody who's eating on Yom Kippur. Not only young children, sometimes somebody who's a medical problem that he has to eat on Yom Kippur. It's
What about
dangerous.
pregnant women?
Pregnant women not always is at a dangerous situation, so they have to consult whether or not they're fasting on Yom Kippur. But if they're not fasting, on instruction of their rabbi and doctor, then they have a special addition into the Birkat Hamazon if they're having bread. Yes. Hanan? No, you're good? Ariel? You're good. Okay, so let's take a look at the page in front of you now. The page in front of you has this big chart at the let's go right underneath the chart and the Hebrew words. Russell, you were asking for the special additional blessing in place of the Ritzei that you skipped. So you have number one is, I know it's very small letters, it's about the Shabbat. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shenatan Shabbatot limnucha la'amo Yisrael ba'ava l'ot v'librit Baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Shabbat. You can see that it's a long blessing. There's Baruch atah Hashem at the beginning, Baruch atah Hashem at the end, and that's the one for Shabbat. Then number two says, what happens if you forget on Yom Tov to say the Ya'alev Yavo? I said you have to repeat it. Well, if you remember right after the Bonei Yerushalayim Amen, you say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shenatan yamim tovim la'amo Yisrael l'sason u'simcha et yom chag ha'matzot hazeh or chag ha'sukkot hazeh, etc. Baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Yisrael v'azmanim. So we have an addition, which is fascinating because it's an addition in the form of a blessing. It's so important that there's actually a special mandated Baruch atah Hashem formulation for it. If you see, now, number three is the Nusach for Rosh Chodesh. Wait, didn't we say on Rosh Chodesh you don't have to repeat? I think it's referring to when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat, then you have to have the meals for Shabbat. And you have to have the meals. You have to mention in the meal that it's on Shabbat, that it's also Rosh Chodesh. So we have that. If you forgot, let's say you said the Ritzei for Shabbat, but you didn't say the Ya'alev Yavo for Rosh Chodesh, so then you add number three. Number four is for Chol HaMoed. You're supposed to be saying a Ya'alev Yavo all 7 days of Pesach, for example. And on Chanukah and Purim, take a look at number five. It's very small letters, I apologize, but the printer was giving me trouble. And as you can see, it starts out Harachaman. So we don't add in the Al Hanisim proper in the middle of the benching, right between Bracha 3 and 4. We add it in afterwards in the sections of the additional requests, the Harachaman, Harachaman, Harachaman. We add one which is Harachaman Yasel Hanisim Niflok Shem Shasit Lavtin Bayimim Bazman Hazeh, and then we go on and we say the regular text of the Al Hanisim. So since we're in the extra territory, we're already finished the blessings of the Birkat Hamazon, you can add the entire long passage of Al Hanisim, which you skipped, after prefacing it with Harachaman, a request that the Merciful One should save you. So I just want to show you the chart, okay? Let's look at the top of the page. There's a chart. If in Birkat Hamazon you forgot or unsure whether you said Ritzei, V'achalitzeinu, or Ya'alev Yavo, or Al Hanisim, so what are the rules? So let's go from the left to the right. The left-hand column says where you were up to in Birkat Hamazon when you realized. This is a few options. If you did not yet say Hashem's name at the conclusion of the bracha, so then you go back and you say Ritzei. If you didn't say yet right? Uvnei Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh Meher V'Ameinu Baruch Atah. And then you remember, you didn't say God's name yet. So you can go back. You go back, say the Ritzei, and then finish the blessing, because you didn't say God's name.
Do you start the paragraph over again, or do you just finish the bracha?
You go straight to Ritzei, and then you...
After finishing it, do you start the paragraph
Yes, you
over?
continue from there to Uvnei Yerushalayim. Yes, you do say that again. Okay, so that you go back, that you're lucky, and that's in the first 2 meals, and in the third meal as well on Shabbat. Let's go to the second row. If you said Hashem's name at the conclusion of the bracha, so you already said Uvnei Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh Meher V'Ameinu Baruch Atah Hashem. What can you do? Now this is an interesting law for all of the laws of blessings. What happens if you remember and you said a blessing, you started to say a blessing, and then like you thought there was an apple in your bag, and you start to say the blessing for the apple, you really shouldn't, but let's say you did. I have one, so it's not a good example. But let's say you, and then you say, Baruch Atah, I think I have an apple in my bag, and I say, Baruch Atah Hashem, and then I'm like, and there's no apple. But you said Hashem's name. So what do? So there's a trick. It's like autocorrect. You know how it works? So the trick is, if you have something else, but let's say you don't have anything else. So the words are, Lamdeini Chukecha Yafeh.
What does that mean?
Means, it's not so important what it means.
I mean,
I'll tell you why. Because, why is it important? Because there is a pasuk in, I believe it's in Tehillim, which is Baruch Atah Hashem Lamdeini Chukecha. So now you've said Baruch Atah Hashem, and you realize you were planning to say Borei Peri Eitz, but you have no Borei Peri Eitz. You have no eitz. You have no fruit. So now you've already said Hashem's name. You don't want it to be in vain. So what's the solution? If you're studying Torah, you can say Hashem's name. So turn this blessing into a quote of a verse. Baruch Atah Hashem Lamdeini Chukecha. And then you're saying a complete verse, and you haven't said Hashem's name in vain. So just remember these 2 words, guys, in case it happens. It'll never happen to you. But let's say you said Baruch Atah Hashem, and for example, right now, we're talking about Birkat HaMazon. You say Baruch Atah Hashem, you're about to say Boneh Barachmav Yerushalayim Amen, but then you realize I didn't say Ritzei. So stop right there, say Lamdeini Chukecha, you'll have covered your Hashem's name, it shouldn't be in vain. And then you go back and say the Ritzei, and then you can go out and say your Baracha, Bonei Barachmav Yerushalayim Amen. Got that? Lamdeini Chukecha, it's a great trick. By the way, let's say you said Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, right? Which is usually the continuation. So then it doesn't work anymore. The trick doesn't work because there's no pasuk Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu.
Can you then say?
And the best thing you can do, it's not as good as saying Baruch Atah Hashem Lamdeini Chukecha, because there's no pasuk. So whenever you say Hashem's name in vain, the truth is, whenever you say Hashem's name or you hear somebody else say Hashem's name, what should you be saying? Close. Yafeh. Yeah. This we say after the Shema, we say Hashem's name 3 times. Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad. So we add in this. It's not quite a verse, but it is a formulation. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Yafeh. Le'olam.
You also say it after you put on your head tefillin, right?
Right, we talked about that. Why? Who remembers why we say Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed after the second bracha on the tefillin? We talked about it, I think. Maybe we didn't. Apparently. But maybe I didn't say it.
I don't know if I was here.
Okay. No, you guys are usually right. And very thrilled that you guys actually do remember stuff I say. So probably I didn't say it. So on me. There is a debate whether or not the mitzvah of tefillin is one mitzvah or two mitzvahs. There's two parts, obviously, the hand tefillin and the head tefillin. And thereby, there's also a debate whether or not there should be one or two blessings. And the common custom in many Ashkenazi circles, is that we say the blessing on the first element, the hand tefillin. And then when we get to the head tefillin, we say a second blessing. But just in case that second blessing is not necessary, we've said the name of God in vain. And so we recite this formulation, which sort of, at least somewhat, is a corrective. And that's what you say whenever you say God's name in vain. Just in case it was in vain, we recite Baruch Shem Kol Malchut Olam V'ed, and that's why it's there in the tefillin, in the order of putting on tefillin. This is the common custom. Not everybody does that. I don't think Sephardim do.
If you're Sephardi, you only say the second bracha if you talk in between the head and the...
That's right. That's right. You're not supposed to make an interruption between the two. If it's considered to be one mitzvah with two parts, of course you can't interrupt between, till you finish fulfilling the mitzvah of tefillin in its totality. And if you do interrupt, so then maybe you need a separate bracha for the head tefillin. But anyways, let's go back to our chart. Chart says, in column 2, if you said Hashem's name at the conclusion of the bracha, say lamdeini chukecha, then go back to Ritzei. Third line is, if you already concluded the bracha but haven't gone any further, make the bracha shena san. That's the one, as you can see in footnote number 1, 2, 3, 4. I showed you those special brachot. That's when you have the special bracha to make. If you said Boneh Barach Yerushalayim Amen and haven't gone any further, and if you went further on in the Birkat HaMazon in the last row, you have to start on Shabbat. You have to start Birkat HaMazon again. But on the third meal, you can continue without going back, because that third meal, what did we say, Renan? You really should be having it with bread, but there are allowances to have it without bread, and therefore the Birkat HaMazon is not a necessity. It's not a regulated part of the services. And so,
Birkat HaMazon even if you didn't have bread, if you were satisfied from it?
no, there's other rules, right? Even if it's mezonot. If you have so much mezonot, it usually goes by quantity,
Right.
not by being satisfied. If you have lots and lots of cake, you've done that. You've been there.
No, I think the laws you're referring to.
Okay.
Very complicated.
Yeah, you have to. There's a lot to learn, Baruch Hashem. But if you do have lots and lots, so basically your snack of cake turns into a meal, and the mezonot, the sort of cake, is treated as if you had a meal, and then you would say the Birkat HaMazon as if you had bread. But that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue.
That's the main issue then, right?
Well, we talk about that also in terms of what's the first bracha, the bracha beforehand as well. So we'll get to that. Okay, Jacob.
Pardon if this is we'll get to that type of question. Just to ask on what she was mentioning about cake.
Cake.
Like when we think of cake, we often think of like sponge cake, but like there's lots of other types of cakes, like like tiramisu, and, like fake cakes made of like phyllo dough, and like lots and lots and lots of cakes. Is there like a reference to where we can, or maybe I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Absolutely, there are entire books here about the laws of blessings.
Cake.
We're just doing a few lessons about it now, but there are books about it. In terms of cake, the critical point regarding the blessings, the after blessings, is going to be how much flour from the 5 grains is in there. Right, the classic question is when you have, for example, cheesecake.
Oh, good.
So the whole thing is cheese.
Or like
Lots of
chocolate
cheese.
mousse cake.
Sometimes, chocolate mousse cake usually doesn't have any flour in it.
Oh, okay. So that.
But if you do have just a thin layer at the bottom, like in a cheesecake or something, of crust made from flour, so then the general rule is the mezonot never goes away. It cannot be subsumed. Mizonot is a significant food, and so you would say the mizonot on the entire thing. Afterwards, though, you'd have to calculate, is there an olive size amount of wheat flour in there? It depends on how thick the crust is.
Or how many
If
slices you
you've,
have.
that's right. When in doubt, have another. Right? And then you'll for sure have an olive size, and then you'll say the ala mechia because you've had that amount of grain. Right? An olive size amount of.
Don't break out the mazon.
If you have more than an olive size, you have to have an amount of, I think, 4.5 eggs. That's quite a large amount.
That's quite a lot. That's
Quite a lot of cheesecake. That's more than one cheesecake. Okay, let's take a look at the pictures at the bottom. We see a few kids. I love learning from these pictures.
How is pizza lechem?
Good question.
I don't get it.
It's a long discussion.
Wait, why is it a good question?
I'll tell you.
Pizza, what's the main ingredient of a pizza?
Well, flour.
Everything. Yeah, the bread.
So the question is, pizza considered bread or is it considered
Why would
cake?
Why would it not be cooked?
This is what Shua was referring to. There's a category in halacha called pata ba b'kisnin. There's three different interpretations. There's three different interpretations for what that means. There's a Talmud has a category called bread which has pockets in it. Some people say it means literally bread that has pockets in it, pockets that are filled with fruit or filled with other types of cheese or things like that. Dumplings could be, that's what it means. Other people say no, it's whenever there's like any sauce that's sort of put on top of it. There's a third interpretation which says pataba b'kisnin. It has nothing to do with pockets. It means something that's crunchy and crumbly. So it's like a thin cracker. So now the halacha about that is debatable. Is it considered to be bread or is it considered to be cake? You can see it somewhere in the middle. And the bottom line is the halacha says it's not bread. It's a special type of bread, but it doesn't have the status of regular bread. You don't say hamotzi on it. You say borei minei mizonot on it. And you wouldn't say the berakat hamazon afterwards. You'd only say the ala michya. Now comes the question of pizza. Does pizza qualify? Well, it's not really crunchy and thin. It depends where you buy your pizza. And does it have a pocket? Well, it's not quite a pocket, but it does have the tomato sauce on top and the cheese. Usually, there's all kinds of pizza nowadays. Yeah, you like the kinds with pineapple, probably. There's also Watch.
I knew we were going to get to it.
Yeah, you tell us, Thomas.
We were going to get to pineapple, but I didn't think it was going to be you to take us there.
What about you? Got to be careful though with the anchovies. Are okay. Anchovies are the types of fish, right? But what do you have, which is not allowed?
Pepperoni.
That's it. You've got the meat and the cheese. Sorry, you get a fake cheese. There is all sorts of things. There's also fake pepperoni, yeah, but not quite. Not quite. As far as I know, I don't know. In any case, let's say it's kosher pizza, okay, yes. And it's delicious pizza. There's a debate about how to treat it. Is it treated as bread, or is it treated as mizonot, as just like cake or a type of thing like that? There is a commonly known halacha, psak, a decision, which I believe it's wrong. It's not my tradition, let's say it that way. And that is, it depends on how much you have. If you have one piece, you can consider it a mizonot. If you have two pieces, you have to consider it bread. I don't find any sources for that. I don't know who said that. It's like almost like an urban legend, in my opinion. The correct approach, which I learned from my rabbis, and I think makes a lot of sense, halachically, is, believe it or not, it depends on your intention, not on how much you eat. Of course, we said before about the cake. If you eat a lot, it turns into birkat hamazon. That's true about pizza too. But usually you don't have that much. But if you're having a meal, say, let's go have pizza for dinner, you wash, You say Hamotzi lechem mina aretz, and you say Birkat Hamazon at the end. If you say, let's go out for a snack, I'm a little hungry, we'll have a slice of pizza, Borei Minei Mazonot, and Al HaMichya after it. And even if you have a second piece, as long as it's not your meal, one of the major meals of the day, you're planning it as a meal, you're just having it as a snack, it should be considered to be Mezonot and Al HaMichya. But there are different opinions. A lot of rabbis have weighed in on the subject. And but the most of, I think, the people you should follow for this halacha, I think, is the Italian rabbis. What I just said now? Intention. See that. Phew. I'm not Italian. Excellent. Okay, Renan, yeah.
I like to have morning pizza with coffee. Instead of
I know that in college, oftentimes you'll have the following morning the cold leftover pizza for breakfast.
Pizza.
That's really because you don't have any other food in the house. But to do that on purpose? Okay. No, it can be. Okay, everybody has their own tastes, by all means. If you toast it up again, it could be yummy, yeah.
No, cold.
Cold.
Yeah.
Rob, this is an American delicacy. Cold pizza for breakfast.
I don't think
It's not a delicacy. It's a phenomenon of college students that have cold pizza for breakfast. That I know, but I don't think it's a delicacy in any fashion. But enjoy, Renan, enjoy.
No, but it's considered like I eat instead of bread.
So then that's another reason to consider it bread. Also, if you're having now there's another question. We're not going to spend too long on the laws of bread, but this is a question sometimes on the airlines. Everybody flew here, I imagine, right?
No, I walked.
You didn't take a boat. Right?
I walked 7,000 miles.
It can be done. It can be done, but so on the airplanes, the kosher meals. Hopefully, you had a kosher meal. Many times they're served with a roll, and it says on the roll, there's a little sticker on the roll, and it says this is a mezonot roll. Do you know what that means? Sometimes you can go to the bakery here or the pizza shop, and it'll say on it, this is a mezonos roll. What do they mean? Well done. What it means is that there is an opinion, obviously followed by many, or the way they wouldn't make it that way, that if you don't use water in the dough when you're making that bread, but you use eggs, for example, or fruit juice, then it doesn't qualify as bread. It's cake. And if it qualifies as cake, you don't have to wash, and you don't have to say hamotzi and say birkat hamazon. And many people like that because they're lazy. But none of us are like that. And as a matter of fact, I have to tell you a story. I'll take your questions. Just one second. My rabbi, who was my Rosh Yeshiva, I learned a lot of Torah from him. I owe him so much. Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein was one of the greatest Talmud scholars of our generation, and I don't say that lightly. And he was famously known to be the rabbi without the beard. Okay, he didn't have a beard. Yeah.
A Rosh Yeshiva?
Yes. Yes.
You hear that, Hirsch? You better
It is possible. Actually, Rav Kleiman was his brother-in-law, who taught here in Machon Meir. His Rav Kleiman's wife was his sister. So it was Rav Kleiman's brother-in-law. Anyways, the story goes that he was on the airplane, and the stewardess brought him his meal, and he got up to wash. And the stewardess says to him, apparently she had been around Jews long enough, she said, no, it's a special roll. That's, it's a mazonos roll. You don't have to wash for it. And he said, oh, thank you. He's very polite. He's a very polite man. He's very well known for his good manners and his proper etiquette. And so he said, thank you. And then a minute later, when he thought she wasn't looking, he got up to wash. And she sees him again, and she says, "Sir, really, I'm telling you, this is the law. This is the halacha. You don't have to wash. I see that you're unsettled. You're not sure about it. So I noticed that a few rows back there's a man with a beard. Maybe he's a rabbi. Let's go ask him." So it's it's okay. It's okay. He didn't care. But he was very clear. He was very clear that these mazonos rules have the same one I just told you about pizza. That if your intention is to have a meal and you're eating a meal, so then it doesn't matter whether it's only with fruit juice or eggs, you actually have to wash and treat it as bread. And so, Renan, getting back to your question, if you're having breakfast and that's your morning meal and you're using the mazonos type food as a replacement for bread, then you should wash and say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz and Birkat Hamazon at the end. Yes, Jacob.
Would I be correct to understand that for pasta, it would be we'd say Birkat Hamazon would be washed, and we'd say like Hamotzi as well?
No, pasta doesn't look like bread. It doesn't have the shape of bread, and it's not bread. But only if you had a lot of pasta, that would qualify as a meal, and you could. You wouldn't say hamotzi for it, but you would say the Birkat Hamazon afterwards. You only say hamotzi on bread, and this doesn't have the shape of bread. It's made of wheat for sure, but it doesn't qualify as bread unless it looks like bread. Hirsch, thank you for waiting.
Since we're discussing mezonot versus hamotzi, something interesting a Sephardic friend of mine told me is that the only challah that is kasher for them in Sephardic halacha is water challah, because Ashkenazi challah is like cake, like old school Middle East.
Lots of sugar, lots of honey, lots of, yeah.
Ashkenazi challah, challah, you have to say mezonot if you're Sephardic.
True. True. The Sephardic tradition, they're very, very particular that the bread should not have any sweetened additions. Okay. Let's take a look at the little boys for today. 1 second. Let's take a look at the little boys. The one on the left says, "Help me." I guess what's he doing? He's putting up a sign. You see that? He's with the ropes. It's very cute. They're like having summer camp and they're learning the laws of brachos.
Well, they seem to be telling each other the laws of brachos.
That's right. The fellow on the left says, "But I haven't said Birkat Hamazon yet." So say it and then come to help. That's true. You should, if you're finishing your meal, you got to make sure to finish your meal and say the Birkat Hamazon first thing. The next guy says, David, you want to read that?
One may still say Birkat Hamazon until 72 minutes after ending a small amount. After eating a full meal, one may still say Birkat Hamazon as long as he's not yet hungry again.
Excellent, excellent. Then someone says that they're drinking. Nathan, you want to read for us the next fellow on the second from the bottom on the left?
Second bottom to the hands, that one?
Don't make a bracha achron on the left.
Don't make a bracha achrona on the drink. Birkat Hamazon covers everything you eat or drink during the meal.
Good. Now the bottom has a halal for Jacob to read.
The hands should be washed with mayim achorayim up to the knuckles, but there's no bracha.
You might have seen this in some homes called mayim achronim, the later waters. The mayim rishonim, the first waters, of course, is netilat yadayim, and mayim achronim, it's a law in the Talmud. Some people are lenient about it nowadays. The original institution to wash again after the meal is, believe it or not, a health precaution. Why?
Because of the plague?
No.
Salt.
Good. Salt was used at the meals, which is from Sodom, and it's not good for your eyes. And they were worried that when you're saying Birkat Hamazon, you might put your hands on your eyes, and you might cause yourself to go blind. And so they said you have to wash mayim achronim. So nowadays, of course, I don't even know what Sodom salt means, and I definitely don't use my hands as much as I think I used to. My mother beat that out of me. Right, I have to use my fork and knife, and So there's not so much danger to the eyesight. But a custom is a custom, and so even though we don't say a bracha, you should use mayim achronim. There's room to be lenient. It is quite common that people don't use mayim achronim. I am not to my. Perhaps I should, be more careful about it. I don't use mayim achronim during the weekdays, but this was my father's custom, so I sort of piggyback on his. But on Shabbat, we do use mayim achronim. So some people make that, even though halachically it makes no sense. The truth is, I don't eat much bread during the week, to tell you the truth. But on Shabbat, when I do have 3 meals with bread, I try to, if possible. So then I try to use the mayim achronim before the benching. Okay, let's look on the right-hand side. The boy's climbing up the tree. The one at the bottom is saying to his friend,
best to sit for Birkat Hamazon, but the main thing is to think about what one is saying.
all right, so maybe the guy jumped up to help before he was finished with the Birkat Hamazon. Not a good idea. You should be reading out of the Siddur and having as much intention as possible. Now, if you look to the left of the fellows, sort of like in the middle of the page, this man is reading a halacha. It says, when there are 3 or more, it is best to say Birkat Hamazon over a cup of wine, a kos shel bracha. The common custom is only to use a cup of wine when you have 10 men, not when you have a zimun of 3, although halachically it's hard to justify. That is the common custom. It's called a kos shel bracha, a cup over which the blessing is made. And we don't have time to talk about it in any greater detail. There is a concept of zimun, which you see on the right-hand side. 3 people over bar mitzvah eat together, they must make a zimun. Before the start, the leader says the zimun, that's the set invitation to join in Birkat Hamazon, and the others respond. And if there are 10 or more, they mention Hashem's name in the zimun. And as I said, if there's 10 people, you also should be using a cup of wine. And that's what he was saying. What are they doing? This kid is saying, you say then there's a whole procedure of how to say the Birkat Hamazon while holding a cup of wine. The leader holds the cup of wine for the entire thing. And then at the end, when they finish Birkat Hamazon, he makes a bor pri hagafen and drinks the wine. And you've probably seen this before. That's all we have time for today.
Usually done only on Shabbat. I've never seen it done daily.
Well, as I said, usually I think people rely on the fact that you only do it when there's 10 people. Not
You guys have a Machon.
in the Machon, if you gather together 10 people, you should be using a cup of wine.
Is it not considered gathering if you're sitting on one table?
So that's a question. It really might depend on your intention. Usually we have a group of friends sitting at one table and there's 3 or 4 guys, maybe 6 guys each table or something like that.
And not everyone eats bread.
But if you do, sometimes they say they silence everybody, let's all do the zimun together, right?
Yeah.
Then there's more than 10 people. And then they should be using a cup of wine.
But I've never seen it.
Well, then there's some room to grow. There's room to grow and fix. Not everything we do is perfect. And maybe there's some leniency because, you're Torah scholars, and if you drink wine, you get drunk or something like that. No, but that doesn't make sense because you could use grape juice. But if you are all doing the zimun together after eating together, and there's 10 people, I don't see any excuse why not to use wine. But maybe there's someone smarter than me that has an excuse.
You don't have wine?
Yeah, what if you just didn't use wine for your
So
meal?
get wine. What do you mean? Nowadays we live in a land of plenty. Go to the Makolet and...
You can't interrupt it to go outside in the store, walk down the street, buy the wine, come back. That counts as a hefsek, and then you can't say the Birkat Hamazon.
Chacham, it says in Kohelet, Chacham einav berosho. A wise man has eyes in his head. You see what's going to happen. You know that you're going to be, so go buy the wine before the meal, not that. After the fact.
Not before the fact.
All right. We'll stop here. Have a great day.
You got it? Actually, I just